comes directly from the AMS edit book. So you'll hear me say it multiple times. I'm going to apologize in advance, but again, I can't say it enough how important those edit books are in this process. So that means those edit books need to be up to date. They need to be current. That sequence, that line of travel, the deliveries have to be in the proper order. All new deliveries have to be accounted for in the edit book. And of course, active has to be correctly identified as active, inactive, vice versa. Even the type and the usage codes on those are equally important. So edit books have to be updated before you can ever begin this process. Transfer that information over into our second part of REX mapping, which is LTM. What happens in LTM, we use that to review the path and confirm our route's delivery stops, travel paths, and plot our traffic control points. So LTM uses the data from DPM along with the GPS breadcrumbs to generate a line of travel. So the second piece here is we've got to make sure that the carrier is driving the correct line of travel. They work hand in hand. The edit book, we send that information over. The carrier, we have to match that up to generate the line of travel. If that doesn't match and we identify that the carrier maybe not driving it correctly or the edit book sequence is wrong, you're going to run into issues, but we'll talk about that later on. So you won't be successful in the beginning with REX mapping. So who is completing the training and the mapping? So again, unit facilitators, you're here today joining in the training, and it's very important that you're a part in this process. So we're going to train you of what all is required in these applications, all the steps necessary to be successful. But of course, you can't do that alone. You've got to have the carrier with you. So the carrier is required to be involved in this process of mapping their route. The carrier is the one that's going to say, hey, that's where that mail stop is, and mailbox and park point and door location, as well as those TCPs, and verifying that line of travel. So again, the unit facilitator and regular rule carrier from that route we're mapping will work side by side together throughout this entire process. And then, of course, we're going to train all EAS. And then our district points of contact, DSSs, and pods as well. So taking a look at our schedule. So how long do you have to do this? So we started training last week, and we've already got some folks out there mapping routes and getting routes certified. But the deadline is October 31st. But I'd like to stress here is that deadline is primarily for our larger units. So if it's a unit that has, say, 40 or more routes, 50 or more routes, they need more time because guess what? They're going to have to map a couple routes a week to be successful. So that deadline really is for those larger units. But for the smaller units, you guys, the expectation for you is one route per week to be successful. So this is a 40-week process from now till that October deadline. So there's 40 weeks. You need to look and see how many routes you have to determine how many you need to do a week. But we got to get started, and we got to get started immediately to be successful. And the sooner the better, because obviously we'd like to have this done by summer when we start getting into peak annual leave time and vacation time. So very important that we get started immediately, and that will begin being tracked next week. So around the July timeframe, we'll begin some maintenance that is going to be required on these routes. So there's routes that we mapped last year through our pilot, and then, of course, routes that are, say, mapping now. There'll be some updates to those routes. So we're going to add some deliveries, maybe have some growth, might even have to do a route adjustment. So maintenance will have to be completed forever on, moving on, anytime we have changes to the route. But that maintenance piece does not take a full 8 hours because, again, everything will be saved. So we'll concentrate on maintenance in that July timeframe. So, again, that deadline is October 31st for those larger units. So for your mapping preparations, what you need to do before you begin the mapping process. Well, we talked about two applications, LTM and DPM. So you got to get access, and you have to have access for each of those applications. So two separate requests here. But it does get a tad bit tricky. So when you go into eAccess to request access for DPM, you're actually going to search for Rural Street Database. That is the application name that appears in eAccess. So for DPM access, it is Rural Street Database. And so for LTM access, it is Rural Route Optimization access. So when you go into eAccess to get LTM, you would search for Rural Route Optimization. Now, please ensure that when you do go in and request your access, that you request the appropriate level of access. I have a lot of users that are asking for district level access or area level access, and I know it's an error, but the problem is those levels of access are read only, so you wouldn't be able to do any work. So just make sure that you get the right level of access, so that way there is no delay in you getting started with REX mapping. And then, as I mentioned, edit books. Edit books must be updated before you begin this process. So we need to do that immediately because, again, we know there can be a week to 2 week turnaround time to get our edit books processed and back to us. And we've got to have those edit books with us when we start mapping as well. And then, of course, anytime we update our edit books, we also have to update those 4003s. They just go hand in hand. And then we're going to provide the carriers with our REX mapping stand-up talk that is out there on our REX headquarters blue page available for you. That's just a tool to help assist you when you go and start communicating with your carriers about what we're getting ready to do and their involvement and the importance of edit books and line of travel. So that's already out there for you available. And then again, during mapping, ensure the carrier is present throughout the entire process. That is a requirement. Again, this is about an 8-hour process per route. Now, if it is identified that you have not included the carrier from the assigned route in the process, you would be required to remap the route. Guys, that's 8 hours you don't have to throw away and waste. So please don't put yourself in that position. Can't stress that enough, the importance of having the carriers with the facilitator side by side throughout the entire mapping process. And then we're going to complete DPM and LTM. The expectation is to complete them in the same day. So they can be completed. Again, both of them together is about an 8-hour process. Now, the great thing is both of these applications have an automatic save feature built in. So there's no save button that you have to click on. So if you get knocked off the computer or you have a quick power outage or it's time for lunch and you got to step away, don't worry. All that work you have done and completed will always be saved for you. Again, the access.